Good evening and welcome to tonight's Master Plan Update Steering Committee meeting. Mike, would you lead us to Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, folks, tonight committee business will go through minutes, approve the draft minutes, public input, meeting schedule, and then we're going to have an open discussion. We have guests from Groton, Harvard, and Boxborough. In just a moment, they'll introduce themselves to all of us. We'll talk about outreach, and then our next steps again, and then adjourn. So with that, take a motion on the minutes.
Move approval as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Public input. Seeing none, we'll press on. Meeting schedule. What do we want to talk about there, Maren?
Right now, we're scheduled through August. Didn't know if you wanted to shoot for second or fourth.
All right, let's make that in our next steps, so we won't hold up our guests, and then we'll talk about further scheduling and what we want to do there. Okey doke. First off, thank you all for coming tonight. We're very fortunate tonight, folks, watching on TV land. We have guests coming in from Boxborough, Harvard, and Groton, who have been through this process somewhat recently, and they're going to share sage advice and wisdom with us this evening. We're going to take an opportunity to pick their brains. So the way we'd like to start this, please, if you all just introduce yourselves, and as I said, maybe just a little bit of background, how you came into the master plan business in your own, or in the planning process. So get a little bit of insight on each of you, please.
We go alphabetically.
Okay,
All
Boxborough.
right, sure, I can start. I'm Adam Duchesne, I'm the town planner in Boxborough. I've been there a little over a year now. My predecessor kind of teed up the warrant article that appropriated funds at town meeting. We were working with MAPC on that, Metropolitan Area Planning Council. So then we finalized the contract, and we're in the process of it now. But we started in October of last year, and we'll likely finish up late this fall or very early winter, but hopefully by the end of 2015 here.
So this December.
Yes, correct.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you. Lucy?
Oh, okay.
Oh, you wanted Groton to go next, huh?
Well, because I'm waiting for my partner here.
Crime.
But we can go. I'm Lucy Wallace. I'm on the Harvard Master Plan Steering Committee. I'm also a member of the Board of Selectmen. We broke doing this plan into two phases. So we went to two separate annual town meetings to get funding. We did phase one with $30,000, which was the general visioning. I brought a copy of what we got. Brown Walker was our consultant, and we started that in, I think, 2011. Finished it in 2012, then we went back and got additional funding, went out for an RFP, and we're still working on phase two, which would be the bulk of the master plan, including the implementation, which we think is really, really important, is to lay out a schedule for items that we need to address and suggested ways of addressing them.
Thank you.
And my
I'm
partner.
Susan Mary Redinger. I'm on the Master Plan Steering Committee. I am the chair of the school committee. And I was lightly involved in phase one of the master plan as a liaison, but I'm more heavily involved with phase two of the master plan. So we're here to provide whatever resources we can to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I'm Michelle Collette, and the Land Use Director, Town Planner for the town of Groton. And this will be the third master plan that we've done in my tenure. And it was most recently started in 2010. Money was appropriated in 2009, and we did the RFP and hired the consultant for the first phase of the master plan. We worked with Judy Barrett of Community Opportunities Group, and then that was adopted by a vote of the planning board in the spring of 2012 as required in state statute, and then we brought it to town meeting and had it ratified by the annual town meeting in the spring of 2012. And like Harvard, we did the implementation plan as the second phase, and got an additional appropriation from town meeting for the implementation plan, and that has continued to be a work in progress with the most recent implementation step taking place at our fall town meeting in October of 2014, where the board proposed a wholesale change to all of our business districts and schedule of use regulations, and that was adopted at the fall town meeting in 2014. So the implementation phase is pretty much completed now. And I also wanted to mention that going way back to the early 1980s, that Littleton and Groton have a lot in common because we're both Phil Hare communities. And Phil Hare was the consultant that we both worked on in the early years, who really left a blueprint in our area in terms of flexible development, transfer of development rights, and all sorts of innovative zoning that the communities that he worked with were some of the first in the Commonwealth to have utilized such provisions to protect open space and natural resources. And then I know that Littleton and Groton used the same consultant 10 years ago. So we seem to be in concert with one another in our planning efforts. So.
Thank you, Michelle.
And I'm Carolyn Perkins. I'm the chairman of the planning board. I've been on the planning board long enough to go through 2 master plans now, and I have to say that the second one was by far a better experience than the first. But we were kind of going through a phase during the first one where people were very concerned about growth. So we got in a lot of people during that one who just didn't want the town to build any more houses anywhere. So that it ended up in sort of an unfortunate. It ended up where the planning board essentially finished the master plan, and we had to let our consultant go. But this one was so much better. It was well done. People were really involved. We got a lot of feedback on what people really wanted, so it was a much more positive experience.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for coming. Did you all have an opportunity to see the questions? The 2 or 3 we sent to you? 2 or 3 pages almost. And board members, if you like, maybe ask our friends here, guests, if they want to maybe hit some highlights as they went through some of these questions, things they think are pertinent. And just a little bit of background, and if I'm repeating what you already know, please excuse me and just stop me. We're in the nascent stages ourselves at this point. We began the process. Our first meeting was, when did we have our first meeting? Back in June. We've been meeting roughly every 2 weeks, twice a month since then. So you can see this is our 5th or 6th meeting. We kind of did the old, Stormin, Foreman, Norman bit, or Foreman, Norman, Stormin, Foreman, Norman. There we go. And then as we're moving along, getting to know each other, certainly we all knew each other for the most part. But then Keith Bergman, excuse me. Yeah, I went stupid there. Keith Bergman, our town administrator, certainly has quite a bit of experience in this, coming from other towns, town administrator for many years, Provincetown, now here with us. Although this is the first one that he'll be involved from the very beginning as we take it through maturation. And we're looking at town meeting also, and as you all know very well, the planning board is the statutory board responsible for the process, and we have representation for planning board along with Board of Selectmen, school committee, and some other committees in town. And in a moment, I'm just actually going to ask people to introduce themselves too, so you get an idea as to the experience that we have, and maybe it's helpful as you go through some of this. But that's where we are at this point. So we're just getting it together, and we're hoping that you folks will help us even kick it into a higher gear. We haven't gone out to a consultant yet, although we have had Mark Racier from APC come out and talk to us and give us tremendous insight as to processes as they understand it. Plus, we have a very good relationship with them. Housing production plan, for example, they did for us, and we're working on the outdoor and rec plan also with them, open space and rec. It is with MAPC too, yes. So,
Groton is the only town that's here with us that's also an MAPC district. The others are in
MRPC.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, we're MRPC as well.
Right. And the R stands for in this case?
Montechusett Regional.
Montechusett, okay, Montechusett, okay, thank you. Gary, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure.
Please.
Gary LaCroix. I'm representing the Sustainability Committee on the board here, and relatively new to the process and town involvement.
Peter Scott on the planning board.
Mike Fontanella, I'm the chairman of the school committee.
Richard Crowley, I'm the chairman of the planning board.
Paul Lavella, and I'm on the Board of Selectmen.
Michael Zeldin, this is an at-large, refers to my role, not my size.
Paul Glavy, I'm representing the Finance Committee, and I serve on the Economic Development Committee as well.
Melissa Hubbard, Vice Chair of the Board of Selectmen. Lovely to see all the ladies represented here.
Very well outnumbered.
We've got one more lady coming, actually, one more member, and she's joining us soon.
So show the questions, and that gives you a flavor as to, it's certainly a broad brush in many ways. But as you look at that, and you've gone through your process, and each of you are at a different stage, and then certainly very different levels of experience, just finishing up one, third one, having done two, and the different experiences. It may ask you, too, as you go through and address, and not question and answer format, but, kind of just make it an essay, how's that? So when you give us your thoughts, and you'd mentioned how you enjoyed the second one a little bit more, Michelle, versus the first one, and without, throwing spears or anybody, things like that. But what might have been some of the things that came out of that as to why one was better than the other as you go through some of these things, so things of that nature.
I think the selection of the consultant is a very, very, very important decision. And finding a consultant that is a good fit with the community is critical. And there are two types of approaches to master planning, and I would suspect that Littleton's probably more like Groton and perhaps some other communities, but all of Groton's planning efforts that have been successful have been bottom-up grassroots planning with a lot of public participation, a lot of representation from various interest groups and constituencies, rather than the consultant who's going to come and bring expertise and tell the town what you ought to be doing. And that works in some communities, but it certainly doesn't work in a town like Groton, because we have a very, very active volunteer base. We have a very active citizenry, and as many people as you can get to attend public participation forums, and we had many successful meetings with that were very well attended on various topics during the planning process. And we also had 8 subcommittees with 5 members on each subcommittee, and the subcommittees were those areas that are required in state statute, such as economic development, transportation, open space protection, historic resources, housing, etc., infrastructure. A member of the planning board served, we have 7 members and me, and so we had 8 representatives from the board who served on each one of the subcommittees, and that thereby communicating to the planning board as to what each subcommittee was doing, so that people weren't going off in different directions, if you will. So having the structure with an active volunteer base and a very active participation by all members of the planning board, since it is ultimately the planning board's statutory responsibility to adopt the plan and implement the plan, seemed to work very well. With the first master plan I was involved in, and then again with the third master plan, but it was the selection of the consultant that really made a big difference, and having the public participation, public facilitation skills is probably the most important trait to look for in a consultant. when when you're interviewing people, and check references with other communities, because you're going to get really, really good references for the good consultants, and you're going to get lukewarm references for the ones who aren't so good.
You had 8 and 5 on each?
We did.
Did you pay these people?
We did not.
Like lots of money to show up?
We paid them no money, but they all showed up.
Can you get somebody to move to Littleton?
We borrow some.
Well, we already have some of those committees. We can just, absorb them into our structure, economic development, housing.
We
So,
did-
to Paul's
we
point-
didn't have a planning committee such as this. We really just did it from the planning board, and then we set up those committees. And then we incorporated in those committees, like people from the Economic Development Group, people from the Sustainability were on, a number of them were on a number of committees. So we took those kind of existing groups and then spread them out through that kind of organization. And then also had people, we sent out notice for people who might want to be on a committee for the town at large, so we had other people who came in. So we had some really good committees, and then there were other committees that sort of came, and you got some good people the first couple of times, and then, there's always that group that fades away, after the first month or so. And then you have kind of usually a core group who kind of finish it off. So it ended up being very effective. And we really started out, our consultant gave us kind of a list of questions as a starting point to really begin the discussions in each of those groups in terms of where we were headed, to begin to get a feel for it. I think if you have those groups and you don't have a little bit of direction in the beginning, you can get really lost very quickly in terms of really what you're hoping to accomplish.
Was there something, or is there something proceeding in the public eye in Groton that makes it easier for you to get the public, not easier, but is there something going on in Groton that people are talking about actively that is looming on the horizon, that attracts their attention, that more or less simulates their participation?
Time around, I think the last time around, like I was saying, there was a lot, God, when was that one? I forget the years.
That was in 2002.
There was a lot of concern about growth and paying for schools, and so that seemed to have a bigger impact. Not this time. There really seemed to be more, there was a little more about sustainability, kind of groups that were more interested in that, but I don't think there was anything in particular that was happening right around this time that caused people to be more involved than not.
And just one last question. Out of how many people on average would show up for the public input portions, or did you work almost exclusively through the committees?
500.
Really?
100?
And we had one of the meetings that dealt with open space, natural resource protection, environmental protection. That seemed to be one of the most active interest groups. And that meeting was very, very well attended. We were also, and still are, working on our town center zoning. In fact, we went to the Commonwealth for our 43D expedited permitting approval along with Littleton and presented at the same meeting to adopt special zoning for the town center, and the historic preservation interest groups and the economic development interest groups, and everybody in town has a vested interest in what happens in the town center. The other thing that we didn't mention is that Judy Barrett and Community Opportunities Group had 2 sub-consultants, Peter Flinker from Dodson and Flinker, who does wonderful public participation, is the consultant that we use with the town center design guidelines. And then we also use Gary Hebert from Face Spofford and Thorndike, who was the town's traffic consultant and transportation planner, and he brought his expertise and knowledge of the town, complete streets and traffic calming and all of those techniques that are now very much in vogue was also an issue. But I really want to follow up just on the sustainability issue, because we have a sustainability commission that's been around probably for 5 or 6 years now. But one of the questions is, what surprised you? And one of the biggest surprises I think any of us had, didn't see it coming, curveball, when we were holding the public hearing on the adoption of the master plan in January, in preparation to go to town meeting in April. We had certain people come out of the woodwork claiming that master planning was an Agenda 21 plot and wanted, of the United Nations, and wanted to have every reference to sustainability and the word sustainable and sustainability stricken from the plan, and wanted the board to go back and edit the plan and take out all references to sustainable development and just purge the plan of that particular concept and word that people found offensive. They didn't participate in the process, but came out of the woodwork at the 11th hour. And it was very interesting that it had the possibility of kind of scuttling the whole thing. It obviously did not prevail. But if you want to know about surprises, it was like, where is this coming from? But so
What was it called? Agenda 21. Was it just Agenda 21? Was there any Jade Helm on that too, or just?
Right.
No, the Jade Helm came later.
Right.
So Lucy and Susan, how does your experience compare?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, this is the third master plan in Harvard that I've worked on, and actually the first one I did in the mid-'80s was very similar to how Groton organized theirs. We broke it into 8 committees, and it was very much driven by the community, and there were probably on average 5 people per committee, and so we had 40 plus people involved, and we did draw from town boards and the community at large. Then our steering committee was made up of the chairs of each of those subcommittees, and we had a consultant sort of help us frame it, and he helped us do a survey, but we did a lot of the grunt work ourselves because we didn't have a lot of money from the town meeting, so it was very much, driven by the community. We did one in 2002 with Judy Barrett at Community Opportunities. It was a great one. She gave us a very good implementation plan to follow. We were very happy with that process. In the intervening time, and somebody noted it in one of their questions, Devens has sort of matured from being recently closed in the 1990s, and the state was stepping in to do all the redevelopment, and the towns were sort of pushed out. In the intervening time, a lot of the redevelopment had been completed, and so the 3 host communities were really beginning to look at what's the future. And Harvard in particular, because there's a sizable portion of Devens which is in Harvard, and it represents a sizable portion of Harvard. So it will have a big impact on the town, whether we resume jurisdiction or not. Anyway, so Devens in 2002 was not part of our master planning process. It became very apparent by the time we were starting in 2010, 10 years later, we had to think about Devens because the public was asking about it. By the time we got through the RFP process, we retained the services of RKG to do the second phase. We started with Brown Walker, as I mentioned, to do the visioning, and what came out of the visioning was Devens is really important. You have to figure out where does the town want to go and what are the impacts with that decision. So for the RFP for phase 2, which was noted in your questions, Devens figures very prominently. RKG, which has done work on economic analysis, certainly for mass development, on Devens early on in the 90s, and I think in the intervening time, was selected as our consultant. By that time, Judy Barrett had moved to RKG. So we were very excited when we started this process. We created a steering committee, or the planning board created a steering committee that had one representative of the planning board, eventually 2 representatives of the planning board because it went over an election cycle. Citizens at large, and then folks from the Board of Selectmen and some other some other groups. When we got further into phase 2, it was decided to keep the steering committee rather small so you could have a quorum easily. When you get too big a committee, sometimes it's hard to get the quorum you need to meet. But then we asked all the town boards to designate liaisons to come to our meetings. And the Conservation Commission, Finance Committee, Historic, and there was EDC, and then, well, Victor's already on for the Devon's economic analysis. So we had probably 3 liaisons that really kept coming very regularly, but we used that as a way to try to reach out to the boards, and we used them as a way to go to the boards to explain what our process was going to be in trying to complete this plan and get their input and get them to pay attention to it. I think the transition into RKG didn't work quite as we expected, and which has caused us to go and seek a second consultant to finish the plan for us. Some deadlines were missed. We started out organizing it around the elements that you mentioned that you were required to cover by state law. Judy in 2002 had done a really beautiful job of combining them all and putting it in a chapter format rather than element by element by element, and integrating them all together in terms of this is the way you are right now, here are your challenges, here are your opportunities, and then here's your implementation. So it read very well as a comprehensive plan, but you couldn't just pick apart and say, what's the whole housing piece or the economic development piece. We started with the 2011-12 version of organizing it around elements, and that's what she recommended. And then she switched into, I want to go back to the version I used in 2002. It led to a muddled process, and probably in hindsight, we cut her maybe too much slack because we knew what she could do. We were really pleased with what she did in 2002, so when some deadlines were skipped, we didn't push back hard and say, you've missed this deadline, how are you going to make it up? I mean, certainly we kept asking her, when will you deliver us this next piece? But I think that's one thing where maybe you, looking back on it, and I don't know what Susan Mary would say, we probably should have been firmer sooner to say this isn't working. How do we restart this? What's the problem here? So I think that selecting your consultant really is very, very important. I think having a very clear timeline. I think our chair had one way of organizing and monitoring the timeline, and Judy had a different way of presenting the timeline, and I think they had a hard time getting on the same page. So I would say, as chair, you should make sure with your consultant you really are in agreement on what the timeline is and how you're going to meet these milestones and what to do if you start to see slippage. Because that begins to impact your community interest in seeing this completed. You want to keep the community engaged.
We had a number of different opportunities for community input. I think we struggled with driving participation from community. We had a fairly an okay response to a survey that we sent out that helped give RKG some of the input. But then we had maybe 2 forums, and we had
roundtables.
We did roundtables, but I would say that we did them over a series of nights and offered them by element, so people could come and comment on the town center and another housing, or then the next night we did public facilities and historical. So we grouped them together, and then the last night was reserved for the Devon's format. And I would say that attendance at some of them was good if you could get 20 people. So I think we found it difficult. How are you really writing a plan that is representative of the town when you're getting maybe the same 20 to 25 people's input over and over again? So that's where I felt one of our steps was to take the plans and then go out to your respective boards and vet it with your boards, because at least you're going to get your knowledge base input from bringing it back out. Maybe they could reach out on issues that need further public commentary, but I really would rely on your use of your boards and your knowledge in that way, especially if your public participation isn't as high, or that you see one demographic represented more heavily perhaps than the other. We always struggle, even with town meeting, to get parents of younger kids involved. And so you were getting the, no offense, elderly population input.
Whoa, whoa.
No, but you would get,
You're getting some.
I know, I got, I'm right in there. I mean, I could go either way here, but you would get a majority of the elder population providing input on the master plan, which is a very different viewpoint than the family who had 2 kids who are just entering your schools. And what makes Harvard maybe similar to many of the towns around here is the schools are great. And people come in for the schools and then they leave, many of them. But now people are starting to stay. There's no housing. You know, we kind of fit the same suburban difficulties that many of the other surrounding communities do, but you really need representation across all demographics to have a really good master plan. What else did we say? Oh, you asked about social media. So we had one of the members of our board, we set up a page, a page on there. We posted, we also have Nextdoor Harvard. I don't know if you do Nextdoor Littleton, but that's a really great way of reaching out people. It's a community-based website, so we could get word out about our public meetings, about our questionnaire. We use the newspaper for publication of broadcasting that as well.
We posted our documents and our drafts on our website. So, and that was, you could get to it from the first page of the town website. So we were really trying to make what we were collecting and what we were looking at very transparent. And I think Nextdoor is a geographically based listserv, basically. You get invited to, and we could give you the name of the fellow in Harvard that got it going. It's huge now. I think we probably have close to 2,000 people on it.
Yeah, almost
More.
2,000. We're trying to get to 2,000, but out of a population of 6,000 to 7,000, that's pretty great.
That's close to all your households, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it runs everything from, the dog is lost, we've seen a dog wandering by, oh, there's a bear in the backyard,
Right.
to posting events, and you can organize it in different ways, but people do respond. You can begin to see a thread of people's commentary and things like that. So we were trying to use social media as best we could. I don't know, because I wasn't, the fellow who was doing our webpage, I don't know if he probably was able to track it. I've never heard from him how many people went to it, how many people were looking at it.
Did you ever investigate email lists?
We have some email lists. So
I mean, did you ever go out and purchase
No.
all the emails that are available, which they are, for many of these towns?
We did not do that.
Okay, so you never priced it ever?
No, I think that there was, people who've run for office often have, or are very active in having a group of supporters that they want to contact about an issue, might have their own email list, and we asked them, could we use your email list to advertise, or would you be willing to send it to your constituents that there's going to be a workshop on such and such day about topic X. When we did have the public forums or the roundtables, when people signed in, we always asked them, put your email address down if you'd like to be contacted by us. Some people really don't want that, so you have to be a little mindful of how much do they want it in their face. But we also struggle with trying to find a time, as Susan Mary mentioned, getting the younger families to participate. We tried to think of times that would be easier for them to come. So a couple of our bigger workshops were held Saturday mornings. Certainly in phase 1, we offered babysitting. Really trying. We have a very good director of food services for the schools, Chef Paul, who does wonderful things. So we paid him to provide, coffee and stuff to get people there. I think one workshop he also provided lunch. We advertise that heavily because people will come for food. I mean, whatever you can do to draw people out and then engage them. That's right. You just got to try everything. It's tricky because you don't want somebody coming out of the woodwork at the 11th hour saying, where did that come from? And they've never been there, or they were very silent, or whatever, so you have to.
That's what our town meetings are.
Yeah, town meetings are a lot like that, especially with zoning articles. You know, people come out of the woodwork over something, even though you've had hearings and all sorts of stuff. So the flip side is you have to know that the people who participated and support the plan are willing to, not only you all trying to defend if somebody's asking questions, that they stand up and also say this is really going to be good for Littleton because of X, Y, Z. They can't be silent either. I think one of your questions was about Devon's and how was that sort of driving our decision, and it really, what we decided early on when we retained RKG and what they proposed was, when we were looking at the elements, there'd be a write-up, say, about housing, and sort of the way housing is right now, and then there, at the end of that section, there would be an assessment of what does Devon's do or not do for addressing your housing needs. And the idea was each of the elements would factor in at the end sort of the Devon's impact as a way of us beginning to think about is that you can't just rely on the financial part, which is where everybody goes. When is it going to, you know, is it going to be profitable for the Harvard or drain on Harvard to have Devon's? It's getting closer and closer to being sustainable, and the information, we have a Devon's economic analysis team that has been getting information from Mass Development, been getting better and better information as they've worked out a better relationship, I guess is the best way to describe it, with Mass Development. Anyway, they have been, and they created a model looking at other towns that had a comparable mix of commercial to residential land and tried to figure out potential tax rates, revenues, what would be the cost of providing services. It's very high level assessment, but really trying to look at what would be the impact on our town, but then also looking at Mass Development's own numbers and seeing that they are getting closer to reducing their deficit as they're operating this and finishing a lot of their redevelopment work. So you have to get people not to think about the economic impact. Say, let's assume that it's a neutral or it's a positive impact for the town. It's not a major deficit driver. What are the other issues you need to address? Because actually it's the cultural pieces for us that will be much bigger. It will be, how do you integrate, there's not a huge population there, but how do you integrate the population? The kids are now going to school in Harvard. They have been for
About
5 years. So those families are getting to know each other. So that's good. I think the Army cut off the local roads that went from Harvard onto the base in the 70s during the Vietnam War to try to sort of keep the base a little tighter. So for, what's that, almost 50 years, we've had no direct access into the base. So there's this whole issue of, well, what, do we open the roads again? What does that do to the little neighborhoods that are, you know, are basically dead-end streets? And sort of a host of issues like that. I think also Harvard views itself as being a rural community. We have, you know, like these towns here, we have windy roads, stone walls, beautiful old trees, and you go on to Devon's, I don't know if you've been there lately, but it's, first off, the Army just sort of took down just about every tree it could because it was building a military base there. It's a beautiful campus-like feel now, but it doesn't look like these surrounding towns. And it's basically a commercial business park. And so for people in Harvard to think this becomes part of our identity when we've always thought of ourselves as being primarily residential, that's a big step, and we haven't quite figured out how to thread that needle in a conversation with the town, and it might be that it really doesn't become a conversation until we're confronted with a very real decision, somebody driving us to say, what are you doing? Right now it's all hypothetical.
Are there people, I'm sorry, sure, please.
I'd like to get Adam some input first.
Yeah.
Your experience mirrors a lot of our experience, you know, at early stages.
Yep.
You know, we've got one or two of us who have been around this block once or twice. So from your perspective, and understanding that it's new for most of us here too, how do you view it? What's been working for you guys in Boxborough that may well work for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think echoing the comments that I've heard, you know, picking the right consultant that's going to fit what you guys are looking for. For me, I mean, The contract was already set up, and my second day on the job, we appropriated funds, so that was kind of already plugged in for me, but MAPC's worked out really well for us. So when we brought them on, the Board of Selectmen then formed a master plan update committee, which was 9 members. And so they were encouraged, before each master plan update committee meeting to kind of discuss, whatever we might be talking about with their own board or commission and come back. I think one of the biggest things that we did was outreach. I think you guys need to find, what works best for Littleton. Maybe it's not, like a social media. I mean, I covered those bases when we did it, email, blasts, Twitter, posting on the website, but what works well in Boxborough for us is sandwich board signs on Route 111. We get about 10,000 car trips down that every day. We have a transfer station which is open twice a week, so I would go down there. I promoted the public kickoff like 3 or 4 Saturdays before it happened. And, people stop and talk to you, hey, what's the master plan, what's that all about? I think people appreciate that face-to-face interaction rather than just getting an email. What else did we do? Oh, we did a tax bill mailing that went out before our public kickoff, so that was like a couple thousand tax bills, and so we had some seniors come in and stuff flyers for that. And then and I also did a bunch of flyering too, covering like the condos and like some of our business areas that I think that helped reach some of our more diverse sections of the community. Ranges of incomes, ethnic groups and everything, that helped cover a lot of those bases, flyering the entire community. So we covered the single family homes with a lot of the tax bills, and then the flyering at the condos, that helped as well. And then that kind of our last big event, so we have a summer event called Pfeiffer's Day, and that draws a couple thousand people. So we did a booth there for the master plan and have an activity with MAPC, and so it was like a chip exercise. We had about 150 people participate in that. We did an economic development survey like halfway through the process, and we got about 200 responses to that. And that was, again, posting on the website, email blast, but then also at the transfer station, just handing people a flyer saying, hey, it's on the town website, it takes 5 minutes, we'd appreciate your feedback. And kind of, I guess I'm working backwards, but our public kickoff, we did a lot of the outreach that you guys said, food was a big one, that kind of pulls people in, tell them it's only going to be 2 hours, because obviously time's pressing.
Oh, so live?
Yeah. But MAPC's one good thing is they have very well structured meetings, and they'll get you in and out and get the information that they need. And so we had about 90 people attend that, which was pretty good for us. People are pretty happy with that turnout. We were expecting 30 to 40, so. And they had to adjust on the fly. Since we were expecting such a small group, we had a bunch of big tables, but they just kind of turned it into open forum, and they did a great job. So for us, our consultant worked out pretty well. And our master plan update committee has met about once a month through the process. We try to keep everything higher level. There are some people on the committee that really want to get into the weeds and do some editing, and so I've really tried to be like, that's great, and if you want to do that, like edit, between meetings and send me comments and send those along, but when we meet, we should be talking about more big picture. This is a master plan, and I think what's going to come out of this in terms of the implementation, we're going to end up forming like a master plan implementation committee, and they'll be charged with kind of cattle prodding the different boards and commissions that are assigned responsibilities to move initiatives forward. So each board and committee will then be charged with kind of following through on the items, but we tried to keep it at that higher level because our master plan update committee is already represented by people that are on at least one, maybe 2 or 3 other different committees, so we try to keep things short, keep it moving along, press forward.
I'd like that verb choice, and I'm going to use cattle prodding.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good.
That was one of the big things that we heard from people was they wanted our master plan to have teeth, so I think we're still trying to get our head around exactly how can we do that, because it's great to have a plan and people reference it and talk about it, and we have a vision statement that people are really embracing, but once we set up these goals and objectives, how are we going to get people to achieve them? Well, the other thing I should mention is over the last year, it's kind of been the perfect storm of long-range planning in Boxborough. So right after I started, we finished our build-out analysis from MAPC. We just got our housing production plan approved, and we finished our open space and rec plan. So we're able to pull off all those different elements and tie them into the master plan, which is pretty unique. Not a lot of, usually those fall in different time cycles, but for us, it was all in the same year. So we were already doing a lot of the work, so MAPC was able to just plug that into some of the sections, and then we were off running like half the plan almost.
And it was MAPC who did all the sub-pieces as well? Were they doing all the sub-pieces?
No, so for the build-out analysis, we used MAPC, the open space and rec plan, they started with, and then I've kind of been carrying on with the changes. And then we used Metro West Collaborative Development through the Regional Housing Services agreement, which Littleton, you guys are a part of, for the housing production plan.
But if you'd like, let's go around. Because some folks had many questions. We'd keep you here for the rest of the week. But let's go around the table, if we might, please. And ask questions.
Sure.
Take it, Gary.
I had one, I guess it's targeted towards Michelle, I think, because you talked about how critical outreach was. And I think it maybe goes to everybody, maybe you can, but maybe Michelle, you can start there. It's how critical outreach was, and then how did you use that as a discriminator when picking between the consultants that you selected? Because I assume that was a discriminator of some kind, but in what tangible way was it used as a discriminator? Because it's a little bit esoteric, because it has to match you. It has to match your identity. So,
In terms of what their style was and their approach to the planning process and what their track record is in other communities, and again, asking them for samples of other plans they have done, but then reaching out to the communities that have used the consultants and the team they have assembled. As I said, we had a team of different consultants that were sub-consultants to Community Opportunities Group, and I want to echo what Lucy said. One of the hiccups we had was when Judy Barrett left Community Opportunities Group and went to RKG. That was a bit of a bump in the road for us. And a lot of it is intangible, interpersonal. Do you like their style and their presentation style, their interview style? And sometimes consultants will submit wonderful proposals, and then when you meet them and you interview them, you may or may not be able to work well with them, but it's a chemistry thing that you learn over the years after working with many consultants in terms of who is a good fit with your community, and by the questions at the interview are very important, and just the interdynamics and what their approach is.
And I think that the interview process, we did ask all those questions. We wanted to know how they would interact with town using social media. We asked them, what kind of events would they plan? What was sort of the pre-planning? How would they interview people who have stakes? So, I think they went around and interviewed everybody in the administration building. They interviewed different committees to kind of get it started. So we kind of asked all those questions to really be clear what their plan would be prior to hiring any of them, is really sitting down and asking those questions.
very specific questions as to.
Yeah, very specific
Okay.
as to what kind of, if they were going to do a big group, how would they structure that? And I think because that was some of the problems we had at first, so that's why we really wanted to be clear.
How would you guys?
When they submitted their proposal and we met with them, we went back through their proposal and asked how, and because we'd worked with Judy before, she was familiar with the community and we were familiar with her, and she'd done a really good job of organizing workshops for the 2002 plan. So I think we had a sense of her way of operating, so we didn't dig into it as much as probably Groton
Because
did.
you already had a relationship with them in the past. You see
We
how they
already
work.
had a relationship with her, yeah, very much so. So it was more discussing the fact that Devon's was now a big thing, and yet we had no jurisdiction over it, and we had, it will be the legislature that ultimately decides the fate of Devon, so.
But we did
How do
clearly
we incorporate
delineate how many meetings there would, like how many public meetings there would be, how many surveys there would be, what kind of the input would be that we would get back from them. And one of the things that I think worked really well is initially she did stakeholder interviews. And so we gave her a list. These are the people that you should go talk to, because we made sure we represented it, all the different demographics. But they conducted the stakeholder interviews, which I think worked really well. But they clearly spelled out exactly what they were agreeing to, and that's the only way you can do it, is to hold them to that exact thing.
Right, and then we did say we wanted to do a survey, and we were
going to do two.
Right, we were going to do a second one on Devon's. We only got through the first one, but we were familiar with SurveyMonkey. She wanted to use SurveyMonkey, so we said, okay, that makes sense. When they were drafting the questions, we had a chance to look at the questions and vet them and go back and say, you know, frame it this way or frame it that way. We had done the same technique in phase one with Brown Walker, and probably had a lot more input on the survey, I think, because we worked it really, really carefully with them. And again, I think Judy had an upper hand because she knew the community, so she was that much further along in figuring out how to ask the right questions to get the information we were looking for.
In your case, you inherited.
Yes, but I would agree with everything that they've said. And I think you'd want to draw out what's the consultant going to do, but then I think you guys should also think about what works for you guys best. And then you can combine those two things, because MAPC, they had a lot of ideas in terms of outreach, and they just wanted to bounce them off me. And I said, yeah. I said, basically, I handle a lot of the outreach and just talking to people. What's the best way to do it? We're a pretty small community. We only have 5,000 people and 10 square miles. So, but yeah, I think combining the two things is the way to go.
Thank you.
I guess the funny part for me is that, hiring the consultant and asking the questions, where did each of your towns want to be in 10 years? What was the final, there's 10 million questions that we keep asking each other, and where we want to go, what do we feel for the town, and where does Groton want to be in 10 years, and what did you do to accomplish that with this master plan meeting? Did you get what you wanted? Did it work?
I think it's worked out.
Actually, it's worked very well.
Yeah, fairly well.
What did you get?
What did we get? Well, we got a new zoning bylaw that works much, much better for the business community. As Carolyn said earlier, the past master plan was really focused on residential development and the concerns about growth. And this time around, and it's probably because of the economic downturn in 2008 and supporting local businesses, we ended up with a master plan that worked really hard to do outreach to the business community. We did forums that we identified everyone who had a DBA on file with the town clerk. So not only did we get existing businesses, but we got home occupations, and a lot of the businesses that are startups in Groton start as, we have a very permissive home occupation bylaw, and many, many, many home occupations. And the turnout from the business community was, it was very positive, so engaging the community, and we were able to succeed in terms of redoing our whole business development section of the zoning bylaw.
That was your biggest intent, was to try and
It really
drive
was.
your business about Harvard.
Well, our phase one was really spent on visioning and goals for the community. And so we had the survey around that, we had workshops around that, and when we got to the end of the process, we had a final workshop to say, okay, these are what we think are the goals and the vision for Harvard going forward in the next 10 years for housing.
All right, that one's, well, you said earlier Harvard doesn't have a lot of
economic development? Have you driven down there?
We have 40 Bs, and now we're basically covered our act for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Do you have issues with affordable housing?
Yes, oh, absolutely.
So with that, did your master plan include positions where you could have, assisted living or,
Yeah, and I think that's where we haven't,
Affordable.
because we haven't completed it, we don't have a strategy for how we're going to address providing the affordable housing we need to provide. How do we provide downsizing housing for our aging population?
It'll certainly be a recommendation out of this master
Yeah.
plan. So that'll be one. And then going back to your, sustainability issue kind of thing, there are things that are not included in the elements that you really want to make sure that you consider. Whatever the pain is in your town, if it doesn't fit into an element, then you still need to put it in, like we have our municipal buildings, that probably falls under public services, but technology. Doesn't, when the framework for the master plan was written, it didn't really encompass that kind of thing. You might consider that public services, but it really is a sort of a subset, and maybe sustainability is that way. And then the other one would be governance.
Yeah,
So that's not necessarily something you would cover, but we're having trouble getting people to serve on, committees and boards, and it's the same people over and over again. So and then now we've proliferated into maybe adjunct boards that aren't really necessary. So how do you, let's take on the governance of the town to have it be more efficient. And that isn't necessarily something that I think falls naturally within the standard elements of the master plan, but you're writing it. So you get to say, and you get to get the pulse of what's happening in the town. So if it's an important area, you should put it in, and you should get feedback on it and figure out where you want to go. There are areas in our master plan that we don't have an answer for yet, but part of the implementation will be, you need a study group because you need to go figure out how you're going to walk away from town, part A to part C, and you don't have that yet. And there was a recommendation of the O2 plan, but it didn't get all the way flushed out. So I think a lot of the fallout of our master plan is going to be, you need to study this and you need to get something done about it, but you don't have to have all the answers by the end of the master plan.
Yeah, one of the things we found in 2002 that was, and I would hope we would get the same thing in this plan, was as part of the implementation, the town center was looked at in the 2002 plan, and it's, it's a historic district, it's sort of where all the roads come together, so you've got traffic issues, it's residential, it has grandfathered commercial uses, all the institutional uses of the town are all clustered there. And the town is very drawn to the center for doing all sorts of community activities. Any community activity sort of is around the town center. So people are very possessive about it in a sense. They don't want to see it destroyed, and yet they wanted a certain vibrancy. Anyway, the recommendation was you need to do a town center action plan to look at the need for sewering, which we didn't have, what's the state of the water system that's provided there, look at not only vehicular traffic, but safe pedestrian traffic, because you're sort of crossing these roads that really were not always safe to be crossing when people are trying to drive through, and how to link one end up behind the town hall where our senior center is at the Hildreth House, all the way down through the schools, through the library, down to the town beach, which is about maybe a mile. And it's this beautiful sort of greenway that, how do you make it walkable? How do you, and scatter the parking, or what do you do about parking? Anyway, so that was something we undertook in 2006. So there was a very clear direction, you need to do this. This is what it's probably going to cost you. Going to the governance thing, I think that Harvard has lived for as long as I've lived there with minimal professional support, and very grudgingly has agreed we need more professional support. We have a part-time planner who's just, it's a contractor position, it's not even considered a full employee position. We started out, as far as town administrator, with an executive secretary, and then that moved up to town administrator. Who knows, we might be really at the point where we need a town manager and not a town administrator, and I know Groton went through a whole charter process to figure that out. So, so I think we have a land use agent who works with the Conservation Commission, but she's also the administrative person for the ZBA and the Planning Board. So she's doing minutes and clerical stuff and but also trying to do the conservation agent work. So we have to, I think, in part of our governance, in thinking about how do we attract people in to serve on boards and get more people engaged, is how do you give, especially younger families who are very busy, the support they might need, so if they volunteer to be on a board, they're not going to be overwhelmed. Now the downside is, oh, you're increasing your town staff? That's going to cost you money. So that's a balancing act, and we haven't figured out how to address that, and I would hope that we have some conversations about that, or say, we should set up a governance committee to look at, the town doesn't have a charter, maybe we need to have a charter committee. You know, and that would be a recommendation, and you say, okay, that's the next piece we're gonna bite off. So I think you shouldn't be afraid to say, here's our overall plan, this is the vision for how we would like Littleton to be in 10 years, and our visions have been really broad. And over the plans that we've done since I've been involved, they've pretty much been the same. So that's good, and you can say, these are the problems we need to work on, but don't feel like you have to have all the answers when you're done with your plan. Just direct people to say, this is the next most important thing, and you need to invest in getting some help on doing that.
You good?
Tell me about Peter, what was his name, Peter Flinker?
Peter Flinker is a consultant that the Groton Planning Board has worked with for, I would say, at least 10 years. His firm is primarily landscape architects and planners. They're from Western Mass, so they bring a different geographic perspective. He has worked primarily on developing design guidelines, working with the town center in terms of planning for the Station Avenue area and the Main Street area. He has been an integral part of our planning process over the years. So when he was a sub-consultant to the master plan consultant, there was a familiarity, as Judy said about Judy Barrett. He knew Groton, he knew the town well, people responded well to him, and there was a very good dynamic. And we still use him as our consultant on certain projects that need evaluation, not just nuts and bolts engineering, but a good landscape architect will bring a whole different discipline to commercial development in particular, and the idea of having everything pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly. The complete streets concept is certainly a very important part of planning, and he was always excellent to work with, and
You
we
mentioned-
have a continued relationship with him.
You mentioned he was able to get the people out.
Yes, yeah.
How did he do that?
Well, it was a group effort. He, because of the topic with the town center, and as everybody has said previously, we would have meetings at the senior center because they have a full commercial kitchen, and we would feed people, coffee and pastries, and then if we went through lunch, we would, feed people sandwiches that we purchased from local, coffee shops and local vendors, and his approach with people and his people skills and his ability to help people develop a vision is something that works very well for Groton, and and certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Just one of the things, just to add to that, right now, there's been a lot of change in the center. We have a school in the center that there's a lot of discussion about what are we going to do with this huge school, how are we going to make it economically viable, how are we going to make it, because for a while the school superintendent was there, but we've talked about really using it, and then we also have the historic Groton Inn that burned to the ground, and what was going to happen there. So there is, you had sort of asked, was there anything significant, and after I thought about it more, the center of town has become, a focal point for a lot of people because they're worried about what's going to happen with the school, and then what was going to happen with basically an empty lot that was in the center of town, and that sort of proceeded to really think about, overall, how do we reorganize business zoning to make it more, really more part of the character of the town. So that that really precipitated a lot of that. And Mr. Flinker was really involved in kind of leading those discussions. So some of what drew people to that were not just Mr. Flinker's skills, but also the whole idea that the center of town was really changing, and people really wanted to have input in that.
Thank you.
Okay, Melissa?
I just wanted to follow up on the community visioning part. And any tips from any of you on making that successful? Because I heard various levels of participation, and it's really important. I want to get that part right. So any definitely do this or definitely don't do that, or any tips on that one, making it success?
I think it certainly depends on the amount of participation you have, but breaking it up into smaller groups. One big group, I think people can monopolize the conversation or take it down a particular path, or you don't really get as many opportunities for people to speak. So if you could do smaller groups within that type of process, I think you'd get more input that way.
We had different, like breakout sessions around topics, and there were certain questions to be asked, and then people were asked to move too.
Like the gym station type of thing?
Kind of,
The
yeah.
loop, and then you get the-
Yeah, and so you had to make sure, we made sure we had, easels with big pads and newsprint, and people were just writing down comments. You needed, just because we were trying to do this rather quickly also, you needed somebody who was a good facilitator just to keep the time moving and making sure everybody, if you had a group of, say, 8 or 10 people, that everybody had an opportunity to speak, and you would say, oh, I haven't heard from you, Melissa. What do you really think about what's a big housing problem, or what's, whatever. And then all those scraps of paper went to the consultant, and they sort of pulled it all together and said, okay, we see some themes in here. And that was tested through the survey.
Yeah.
And asking questions, and so it was broken around again, the various topics, and there were a series of questions. And then the nice thing about SurveyMonkey is you can analyze that response in a whole lot of ways. We did ask people to voluntarily, at the end of the survey, we broke the town into, I think, 5, quote, neighborhoods. People don't like that word, but 5 areas. So we asked people to identify, which area did they live in, and they were really big areas. And, sort of gross demographic information, how long have you lived in Harvard, you have kids in the school system, have they gone through the school system, just to get a sense of what their perspective of the town might be, how long have you lived here. And so you taking all of that, you can begin to go back and parse some of the answers. Again, you can run it through that filter of the people that lived in Area 5 answered the questions this way. So these are the impacts they see. So that just helps you. And then, as I said, we came back at the end of this whole visioning period with what we had found. And we had, the consultant had created really big boards on each of the topics with the key findings and what we were going to have to pursue in phase 2. And again, it was a way of vetting it with people, did you feel comfortable with this? And we had created an overall vision statement. And, so some of it is hearing from them and then sending it back to them. And it was truly an iterative process, much more so than I think phase 2 has been, because there was, for whatever reason, people really wanted to come out and talk about what are their hopes, or what do they expect the town to be in 10 years. And when you get down into the various pieces of it, some people don't care about traffic, so they're not going to go to a workshop on traffic.
And for us, it was just about outreach and giving yourself enough time to promote our visioning session kickoff. Like I said, I think, so ours was in the middle of November. I think I started going to the transfer station like a month in advance. And I give yourself at least a month, if not more, so people can plan and like move their schedule around if they want to attend. And then I'll echo I agree with the comments about the large group versus a small group. We wanted to do small groups, but we had such a large turnout, we had to move to the large group format. But we also had, you talked about some of that demographic information in neighborhoods. We had the first half of our visioning session was, I don't want to say silent, but people would walk around the room. It's like, where are you from? How'd you get here? What are the 3 most things you're concerned about in the community? And so people could write those down. So if they didn't want to speak later, at least we still were able to get some information out of them. But then we had a larger forum, and I think it actually worked out. I mean, people were able to speak up. I think it was, we might have been lucky, because a lot of times in a large setting, people don't want to speak, or they're afraid they might offend someone, or for any number of reasons. So the smaller groups is probably the way to go if you can. And also the rotation thing, I think that's a good idea too, because you don't want one person at a table necessarily monopolizing. And certain people want to talk about different things, so maybe you don't want to just assign and say, "Or you guys go talk about transportation," when someone wants to talk about the school system or open space and recreation. So you got to give them that flexibility too.
I think the other thing we spent as a committee a lot of time strategizing on was what's the best time of year. It's sort of like the dead zone from Thanksgiving to Christmas is like anything big, don't try to do it then because people are so distracted. And then
Definitely don't do anything in the summer.
yeah, and we're very
All on.
Here we are.
Here we are. And also, be mindful of school vacation, and so where does it fall within your town meeting cycle? So they're distracted by, the budget issues coming out or zoning changes. I mean, you begin to realize you have very small windows, but I think early on, sort of figuring out those target times that you want to get to this by such and such a date. So then you begin to set some milestones for yourself.
And one of the best master plan implementation meetings that I ever went to was not in the town of Groton, but it was in the town of Westford, and it was in the middle of the summer. It was a night just like this, and they rented a tent, and Kimball sponsored it, and there was free ice cream, and so if people turned out, people with young children came, and they had a relationship with Kimball's, and I'm not sure whether they paid, whether Kimball's did it as a donation to the community, but they had everything set up in a rotational fashion, and people came and stayed and participated, or came and had ice cream and put their comments in the box, and it was really remarkable how well organized it was and everything. And I thought, this is a really, really good event to tell people about that.
It comes down to the food.
Absolutely.
Kimball.
Do you understand food is important?
We need a food budget.
Paul?
Okay, there were 3 points I was hoping that each of you would have some feedback on. One of them you touched upon. I was interested to hear that there was consideration of the topic areas outside of the 8. How you went about addressing that, and whether did it come up organically, or did you structure, making sure you weren't hidebound to those areas, because there's very little statutory guidance here, and it has been pointed out, it's old. So, I mean, I take that as, well, there's a freedom there to do what you want. And, some of the other things you mentioned, governance, we've had a recent town government study committee, so maybe that's not our area, but it could be, I don't know, from my own perspective, we don't have any kind of financial goal setting, revenue growth goal setting. So if you had conversations about incorporating things that are non-traditional, not like, streets and roads and trees and zoning laws, and how does that get dealt with? Any of you?
I think some of it came up, as you said, very organically, because if you look in state statute, you will not find sustainability. And yet sustainability is a very important part of each one of the elements. And as I said earlier, the town had a sustainability commission who ended up not by design, but by the volunteers coming forward, pretty much had a representative on each one of the groups. So throughout the different elements, the element of sustainability was a common theme, and it was a common, really became a common denominator with the whole plan, which may have contributed to it being a lightning rod at the 11th hour, but it certainly, it certainly was not a prescribed element in statute, but it was a very important part of the process, and it was very much grassroots.
I would echo. We have Harvard as one of the green communities in the state. We have the first community solar garden. So that isn't going to fit in a master plan necessarily, but there is a very dedicated group of volunteers who just got another $245,000 grant for the town. So those are the kind of groups that you want to be reaching out to. Somewhere just doesn't, as you said, doesn't fall into roads and trees and sewer. So I agree, it's very grassroots. But then we also have maybe technology is another area because that falls across both the schools and the town. We share the technological resources. So sometimes it's a combined effort and there's no agreement necessarily on who owns it, but it lives somewhere and you have to provide a direction because that's, paramount in many places right now is how are you going to move forward as a technology community. So, yeah, I mean, I think though that you'll hear in your outreach and your visioning, people will bring up what is there to be dealt with. It's not a mystery. You don't have to go looking for it. It will find you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's gonna bubble up. I mean, you're gonna have your main elements, your major players in the plan, but then as the conversation starts to unfold, actually for us, the same thing happened when the Board of Selectmen was talking about who they wanted to have on the master plan update committee. It was planning board, conscom, and the Board of Selectmen, and all of a sudden it was like, well, what about, this and that? And then the energy committee actually ended up getting somebody as a voting member on there, which is an entity that I may not have guessed out of the gate, but, they've been a valuable asset.
Who you choose to include can dictate what the final product's going to look like.
Right, yep, absolutely.
Second point is, we've spent a lot of time reviewing, actual RFP drafts that your communities and others had produced, and one thing that struck me was, there's a lot of difference in there. A lot of towns chose to put a lot of time and space and ink into telling the applicants all about their community, and I don't know, I was just wondering how much, what kind of discussions you had about what to include in an RFP and what not to. My point in bringing up the length of some of the others is, shouldn't we expect the applicants to go out and do that research themselves? And, how did you approach the process of the actual draft language in the RFPs?
It was a long time ago when we wrote the RFP, but we put the basic format. We, too, looked at RFPs from other communities to see what fit. We put the demographic basis and all of the basic information without embellishing it. I agree with you. You want a consultant who's going to do their homework and learn what your town is all about.
Did you have consultant help at that point? No. Okay, so you did that internally. All right, because we've had that pitch floated that you can hire a consultant to help you do the.
No, we did it ourselves.
And I think because of the Devon's particular, strangeness, what we included in the RFP was a lot of the information that was publicly available about Devon's that we thought would be important. We also had a bidders conference ahead of the proposals being submitted with the intent of, well, what are some of the common questions? And then anybody who had requested the RFP, we sent the questions that had been asked at the bidders conference, even if they weren't there, and the answers were provided to them so that everybody would sort of know what.
So that was what, a month or two before the RFP went out type thing? Or?
No, this was after. The
after,
RFP went
okay.
out, and then there was going to be a bidders conference, and then 2 weeks later, the proposals were due. And then we had our chief procurement officer go through it pretty carefully to make sure it was okay. Now, she's looking at it in terms of me complying state bidding laws and stuff like that. But yeah, I think you want to give them a sense of what kind of community are you and what are you looking for? Why are you doing this? Just because it's 10 years and you're supposed to under state law? I mean,
and that's the other thing too. I think a lot of what we were receiving from RKG initially was just a rehash. I mean, a lot of it was just master plan number 1 rewritten or chunks of it just taken out. And so you can either update your plan, as I think some of you guys were doing an update, or you can provide a whole new master plan. Right. But I think you want to be clear. We don't really need to revisit the ox and the plow and have that carried forward and have whole chunks of your previous master plan put in the next one. So, you want to be clear from the beginning, what is it that you're looking for?
You weren't involved in writing it?
Yeah, not really. We went through MIPC, so that kind of started on the whole RFP.
Last point, quick, this might seem odd, but I mean, a lot of people have ended up having two-phase process, and that seems to be maybe an operational norm. Did anybody ever explain why that's the norm, or why did you decide to go with the two-phase process?
Because we weren't going to get it past the finance committee.
Money.
Okay, yeah, those guys, really, okay.
Those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, stay with it, yeah.
That wasn't a driver.
This one's been getting pushed by the finance committee, this happened, so no problem there.
If that wasn't a driver, would you?
Yeah, I'm good with that. So
Would two phases?
No, because actually in 2002, it was all done as one thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't split into two phases. We got an appropriation to do the whole plan, and I can't remember what that amount was at this point, but it started out with doing the visioning, and we had the whole visioning process thing, and that kind of got all done, and then we got into the meat of it.
So it was really practical considerations, it wasn't like there's a magic to doing it in two phases type thing, no?
No, it was totally practical to see
Okay.
what was finance committee going to support.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for the incredible tutorial effect of all this, how to do it 101. And also, I'm really stunned because I really appreciate what you're coming forth with, because when you look out at the broader, I'll call it the literature from out across the United States, sitting in this room right now are at least 5 people, maybe more, who actually have more information right at their fingertips about what it means to plan for and to some extent run a, quote, small town. That is not out there. It's not out in any particular form, and there are themes here, and I hope you guys all get together, and I'll help you, and I'll show you how much royalty you can get for your book on Amazon. Anyway, I just have just an observation, and these come from graphs that scare me, right? One of the things I looked at, it scares me, it doesn't have to scare you, is that the amount of funds coming from the state to the smaller towns has plummeted since, I'll just pick a date, before 2006, and it's been going straight down. Okay. Which, this is economics with a capital E. I'm not just talking about classic stuff, I'm talking about the other kind as well. What really would concern me is, do you have a sense that the choices that you can make, I mean, it's very nice to have a plan and offer suggestions, but the but is, do you ever confront directly in your plan or in your discussions with your fellow citizens that the number of choices that they're going to have and are having for what they can do with their town are being whittled away, not just by how much the state is given, but by radical changes in the economy? And I'll just stop there. And is there any sense that it permeates, even sits anywhere near it? Because I've looked at all your budgets, and I can see that you're just like Littleton and a bunch of other places, with one or two notable exceptions, where the amount of money you're getting from the state is heading down, not just for the schools, but across the board.
I think the underlying tension is, and how people look at their investment in whatever town they're living in, is what's the impact on my tax bill? Most people aren't aware of how state aid has changed. Even if you put it out around budget season, we're grappling with increased costs because of this and this and this, but state aid is anticipated to go down by this amount or whatever. I think the first thing they all go to look at, and what our local paper often prints, is when, in December, when you get your tax rate set, and then everybody begins to look at what their tax bill is going to be, it's like, well, how do we compare with, similar communities, our surrounding towns, or towns of the same size or whatever. So it's really tricky. Now, we've had one selectman who was, prior to being a selectman, was part of the Suburban Coalition. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's a group of people looking at how else can we address funding needs for towns out on the 495 area. And one of the things they were looking at is a local levied income tax that towns be allowed to adopt, because property taxes are so regressive. And we have, people who've lived in town for over 50 years, and their property values have gone up, they're living on a fixed income, their taxes are going up accordingly. It's a real squeeze, and then you have somebody else who moves in, and they can afford to buy a really expensive house and pay those taxes, but they probably have a little bit of a cushion in there compared to the person on a fixed income. That has, that sort of floated in town, and then it died It's a pretty quick death. Because people are nervous about additional taxes. So I think where they're looking for, when they're aware of the budget and how you're trying to build it every year, they're really looking for where are the revenue growth opportunities that don't negatively impact the town. And that is, you know, we look at our little pathetic commercial district on Air Road that has so many challenges. I mean, the owners there don't want to talk to each other to come up with a vision for what they would like in that district, and our zoning is totally wrong, so we know we have to work on that. And people have floated different ideas of things to try to bring there, and, you know, the surrounding neighborhoods are right away, the traffic, we don't want it, the traffic or the lights or the noise, and
Parking.
yeah, parking. So I think that it's such a difficult problem to parse because people are always mindful of what they are paying personally, but they're not looking at the bigger picture of what the town is trying to provide and then where they're getting the resources. I mean, so much of our money is coming from our property taxes that we, use to fund our budgets.
Well, we've raised Harvard's proportion of taxes has gone up in terms of the cities in Massachusetts or towns. So it's getting higher and higher for us because the commercial base is not there. And I think people understand that the funds are going down from the perspective of it's very hard to maintain the infrastructure that we have. So our municipal buildings are in deplorable condition. And there just isn't money. There's no one wanting to invest in that long-term structure because that's really sort of the padding money that you would use for that, and that's gone. And so now you have to choose between funding the technology at the schools or refitting the town hall. And which one are you going to do? So you let the town hall fall into the ground or get declared unsafe, but because the schools are the thing, but then that's going to start to not be the thing.
This is a school committee member.
So, right, you can tell, right? But eventually people are going to start saying no to the schools too because there just isn't that largesse there.
And the irony is, as you raise the taxes, the total amount of wealth is represented in the town. But along with income, that means you get less money for the schools. Right. Because when they do the calculation with the, it's amazing.
Well, I think, and then there's the other scary thing of OPEB, which we're all facing. And all you need is one person at town meeting to stand up, and it happened a few years ago, and talk about, we have this unfunded liability that's looming. And, we almost lost money for some other projects because people got scared. It was like, where are we going to come up with this? And, and there's some ways that the state's not providing a whole lot of guidance either. I'm saying, they have a huge problem. We all have that problem. Well, how are we going to deal with it? And then your auditor comes and says, well, your bond rating's going to be affected if you don't start putting some money aside.
Well, one town came up with a great idea for affordable housing. They're going to now charge all developers 3 times what they were before. And the developers really love that idea. And they're flocking in and they're paying 3 times more to develop in this town. Not Littleton, obviously, and not where you are. The name of the town starts with a C, it's Cambridge. They're now requiring.
Yeah, thanks for that input.
I read something in the MMA Beacon that came out this week, the town of Lee, which is in Western Mass on the Mass Pike, and I don't know if they're going to make it through the state legislature, but a 3-cent a gallon gas tax. And they have a rest area on the Mass Pike. And if that works for them, it's a stroke of genius. But the caveat was the money was only for roads and bridges, but the idea of a local gas tax, I thought, wow.
We were thinking about tolling everybody coming from Groton. Just 3 cents, that's all.
The market basket tip. That's it.
It's going to be on 119, and no cutting through Gilson Road either.
Here's what I'd like to ask, because you're in phase 2, you're very early in the process yourselves. Well, I guess maybe not so early anymore.
Yeah, we're towards the end.
So you did say December, didn't you? But would you mind giving Maren your schedules for your meetings that you have at this point? Email them to her, because what I'm going to ask, and we don't have to, excuse me?
What we did, or what?
No, your schedule going
upcoming
forward.
meetings, yeah.
So your upcoming meetings?
We're going to come on to
Please God, they're coming to an end, right?
I think December.
We've been doing this 3 years, so.
Because we'd certainly like to be able to stop in.
Yes, absolutely.
And spy on you all.
Sorry. Yep.
So that's what I'd have. I really want to thank you all very much. It's extraordinarily kind of you. It's your personal time and evening in another town to help us out, one of your neighbors. Thank you very much.
Thanks for asking.
Sorry we didn't bring food. Mike, give me your credit card so they go to Kelly's.
I thought it was your turn.
Yes, thank you. Our schedule. Oh, thanks for inviting us. Good luck.
Thank you.
May the force be with you.
I said 101. Forgivable.
All right, outreach updates. Has anybody had an opportunity to, speak to any of your committees?
It's summer.
No, okay, fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I wasn't at the last meeting, sorry, 2 weeks ago, but I had talked to the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and it was a sustainability meeting last week, and so I just passed on what what we're doing and what's going on, and no major issues, just spread the word around.
Was there interest there, or beyond just listening to you for 10, 15 minutes?
Logistics of how to best engage them was discussed. It's a legitimate question. I said that if I thought there was an agenda item that I thought would maybe be particularly relevant to them, more than the usual stuff, then I would forward those on. And vice versa, if I think if there's information that I want to pass on, I would pass on information. Sustainability, I'm in that committee, so that's easy. Bicycle pedestrian, my wife's on that committee, so that's easy as well. So somehow I'll get the word out to them.
Bicycle built for two?
Split and conquer.
And we had a member or the chair of the bicycle committee come to Selectmen last night and mentioned that they were engaging early, so that sounded.
Was that Ronaldo?
I forget the names.
I think my wife came to the meeting last night, I haven't had a chance to talk to her about it.
I think it was Ronaldo.
Sounds
That's
familiar.
right, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, it's great. It's working.
All right. You want anything on social media?
I do not, and I claimed vacation last week, so that's my excuse. I've got.
You can only do that stuff at work.
But I will get on it. Vacation really messed me up.
I'm going to put the schedule in here right now, folks. Do we want to stay with this schedule we've had over the summer now?
I'm fine with the schedule as structured, but there's Tuesdays are also the night FinCom meets, and I just asked that somebody, Myron or Keith or somebody connects with Betsy Bowling so that,
If we staggered it off?
I think this might well work. It's just the communication needs to be there, because this is generally the room FinCom meets too. I mean, it only affects me, but it's just FinCom meets on Tuesday nights,
So it's
and usually about
logistics.
twice a month too. So I think it can easily be worked out. I'd appreciate if whoever's doing the scheduling would,
All right, well, if we're overlapping now, if we just moved a week,
It isn't, no, the schedule for the fall hasn't been set yet for FinCom, so I think it can easily work around there, you think, so, yeah. And through the summer, it hasn't been a problem because we don't meet that often. But starting September, we'll be meeting more regularly.
would you, help initiate this with Betsy?
I did talk to Betsy about it, but it's more, we scheduled meetings and she was aware of them.
All right, so how about if we schedule going forward then, like we have, and that way, and then Finance Committee?
Well, yeah, whoever's assigning the rooms, I mean, what is it Jennifer does that, or?
Yeah, I request them and then she
Okay.
sends them, but then if we have that
Because even-
conversation early, that's good.
It's not a big deal if I miss a meeting, but the rest of the FinCom kind of doesn't always like to get shunted
No, fair enough.
upstairs,
No, I've got no problem with that, and it's easier to do TV down here
Yep.
for the FinCom, so that makes good sense. And all we have to do is stagger the meeting.
Right, exactly, that's all I
All
ask.
right. So then, from our perspective then, like we've been meeting, going forward, we'll just extend it on through December, at least for now.
Yeah, I think that, I noticed we have here some talk about subcommittees.
Yeah.
I would like us to, if we get into a subcommittee structure, then maybe we can think about backing off the full committee meeting schedule of twice a month, just if we all get into agreement on that. That it doesn't sound like it's imminent, so that's fine, we can just stay where we are until that gets to be more pressing.
Okay, RFP Subcommittee Working Group. That means we want to write an RFP, or we want to still go out and look at getting a consultant to find us a consultant. What's our thoughts there, folks?
Has it been decided that we're not going towards MAPC?
No, we've not made a decision one way or the other.
Okay.
The only thing that's been decided on that is that they're gonna, if they do one, they don't do the other.
That
But that's
piece,
their
yeah.
decision.
That's,
their
yeah, right.
decision.
I don't know, I asked, a relevant question to that, a question relevant to that, and I was happy with the answer I got. I mean, it didn't sound like anybody there felt they needed to have a consultant to help them write the RFP, but I think thought needs to go into it.
What it requires is a commitment of 2, 3 people.
Yep.
To sit down, pen to paper, or
That's
fingers
right.
to keyboard.
Sure.
That's right.
Now, so let's ask it this way first, if you think. Do we have a commitment for the people sitting at the table right now? 3 people committed enough to take an RFP from sitting here where we are now, nothing, other than other examples and the like, to ready for prime time and being posted under Massachusetts procurement laws?
Since I've raised the issue that we can do it ourselves, I'd be happy to volunteer to be a part of that
That's
effort.
one.
Yeah, I'll, if you think I'll be helpful or not?
Oh, wait, I'm not gonna work with him.
That's out, all right, I'm out.
No, that's fine.
I know you were serious, come on.
Really?
Well, yeah.
Which is you were serious.
Are you in?
Sure, I'll be.
I wouldn't say that to your face, Mike.
Why not? What else would you do it? Why wouldn't you?
Why don't you put your names in a little hat and we'll
He's
pick
got
it
more-
up.
No,
You got more
it has to
poli-
do with skill sets and knowing the
All right,
town. I'm
one
really
sec.
trying
We're
to.
up to 2, and I think we need 3.
I can,
Selectman?
I could probably
yeah.
help.
I want probably.
Oh, I've got way too much on my
Yeah,
plate.
yeah, but look at, you're clicking away on the
binary.
computer there.
I can take notes
Can
until
do
the
it,
cows come home.
cannot do it.
Who?
No, that's, I think it needs to be binary. I can't say probably, maybe, possibly.
Well, the thing is that the
The
town.
commitment has to be
The
there.
thing is, Bonnie has some great templates for
Uh-huh.
RFPs that have the whole RFP. So all we have to do is change the front end and change the
That's
scope.
what I don't want to
That's
do.
the work. That's the work. Who's committing to do the work? We have
I mean-
2 so far.
Look at them, but I'd love to avoid having something that looks like it was a template from somewhere else. Right? So maybe we should work together, because we're coming from different places on that.
Do you want to,
Yeah,
okay.
I'll work.
Rich,
Oh.
Paul, and Mike
Yeah.
are committed Americans, Littletonians,
Oh, boy.
dedicated to the task of producing an RFP. Now, I'm going to put this to a vote because the whole committee, I think, I want us to be on record, that we've decided to stay internal, organic, to do the RFP. So if someone wants to craft a motion along those lines,
Can I,
Or
just
discuss,
before we
yeah.
take the motion?
Yep.
What's our quorum number?
7.
7. So how many of us can meet at any one time without violating open meeting?
6.
I would recommend that you,
Post.
a subcommittee be
Oh,
posted.
you have to
Okay,
post.
that's fine, 'cause that's what I was going, that's where I was driving, was I would like to see us posting all subcommittee.
Oh, yeah.
So that if
Yeah.
people who can't commit to being involved from soup to nuts, but want to be part of the appetizer or the entree, they can get involved.
Yeah.
So given that, that's the only point I was trying to make, so I make a motion that we form a RFP subcommittee consisting of Paul Glavy, Mike Zeldin, and Rich Crowley as the primary members.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded for Paul, Rich, and Mike to be on the RFP subcommittee. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thanks, gents.
So maybe we should set a goal of trying to meet in between now and our next meeting of this group and have some initial thoughts on it,
We'll
and
have
we'll
to-
post it.
Yeah, we'll have to set that goal, and we'll have to let Maren know so she can have it posted.
Same thing just said.
And here's what I'd like you guys to do, please. If you can't get it done by the next meeting, but certainly by the following meeting, is your game plan.
Yeah.
Is how you want to approach this. Because you're not gonna, it's not gonna be daddy, mommy, may I have permission type thing. But I would like you to be able to run it by the whole committee.
Before you get too far down a road there.
Yeah, so we're all,
Yeah.
we're in unison, lockstep on this, okay?
Just on a practical note, I know Mike and I are generally around town during the day, both work in town. Are you at all available during the day if we had, okay?
Yeah.
Because if we met with Maren and posted the meeting in the planning board office, just for the kind of work session parts, it might be,
I just need to know what day,
yeah.
because.
Well, we can talk that offline.
Because I'm in and out of town a lot,
Okay.
in and out of Boston a lot. So if I can know the day, I can arrange something.
If I remember right, we do have the commitment that Keith said, if we decide to do it internally, we can run it by MAPC for suggestions.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because we almost have them on retainer. So,
And we do have a budget, you know?
yeah, and you're absolutely right, we do. So we've got an opportunity if
Yeah.
we need,
Good.
if it's the right thing to throw some cash at it, to make it.
Okay.
we can do that.
So moved.
He sounds like a very happy fellow over there, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's less enthusiastic than he was about 5 minutes ago.
Sure, I'll go out, I'll be the point man, yeah, I'll go out.
This guy was up at 4:30 this morning, on his way into Boston at 5:30.
Just take the
Why were you
train.
late?
No, I didn't take the train, I took the traffic.
My cat got me at 4:30, but I went right back to bed after I let him out.
Okay,
Open the window.
so our next meeting is which date, please? Is it the 11th?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down.
I will not be here for that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I will send out the updated schedule.
All right, so I know Mike's not here. Who else are we missing?
Was that is that woman been appointed yet?
No, and when are you doing it?
Planning board do their appointments, August 20th is our next meeting.
All right, so you know what we're gonna do?
It's a long ways.
We've got to get on the selectmen's agenda the 7th. Is that when we?
10th.
The 10th, right? Yeah, let's remember that, please, Melissa.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And that way, as soon as you all do it, it's done deal, and then Betty can
So
start.
that's still not gonna
meetings.
cover you for the next meeting.
Correct, yeah.
So you're gonna have to talk to John Bielefeld or something to make sure he's gonna be here, otherwise you're gonna
I know.
get there.
I said Mike, didn't I? Ed is who I really meant, apologize. Ed's certainly very busy this time of year with landscaping, so we may be tight.
Is John around? Is anyone?
Typically, yes, I would think that you have a good shot at him, but I think it's obvious that you're gonna have to lock it down, otherwise you're gonna be wasting your time.
Well, we got the 11th for now, and we'll work to get the, is that when we're having Northeastern?
No, that's scheduled for
The
the
25th.
25th.
Okay, thank you. Great. Then what do we have on tap as far as guests or anything like that on the 11th? Anybody?
Don't have anybody scheduled.
Okay,
Take a break.
Sorry I missed the last meeting. Someone told me there was no meeting.
Oh, I told you there was no meeting the day no, I told you there was a meeting the night there was no meeting.
No, that was.
Because there was a third Tuesday that month, that threw me off.
It was me.
I took the first ride on my
That was
left.
the fifth Tuesday, that's the
Stop
one.
it, stop it. You're killing me.
Yeah, sorry, there's 5 Tuesdays. That threw me off.
So,
Let's keep it on the calendar for now, please, because what I would like to do is this RFP subcommittee
yeah.
to have a suspense, to come back to us at least with a game plan, and use the 11th.
Yeah, you better keep those guys, keep an eye on those guys.
Tight eye. Okay, anything else you guys want to talk about tonight?
Subcommittee, do you have, what day works best for you next week?
One sec, you guys just do that offline.
Okay.
Gary?
Did I have anything else?
This evening?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
You got this, right? Master plan timeline?
Yeah, I actually did want to go on like that too. Let me save it to the 11th, please. Should we all have see it, read it, have read it?
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah, it's getting late, that's why it's okay with you.
No, we're all set.
Paul? Nope. Melissa?
Just social media subgroup, working group, remind me, I'm sorry, what did we say about, I know that it's just us two, right?
I think right now it's just gonna be us
Okay,
two.
so I gotta do my thing and then,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah,
I will get on my actions, I know I'm
Blog,
behind.
we're talking about Keith helping us with Twitter.
Yeah.
Just as examples. The next door,
Oh, yeah, I wrote that down,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll go check whatever that is.
Westford had something similar, maybe has, I haven't looked at it in a very long time.
So I can ask
And I
that.
can't remember what it was called. It was called something different than next door, but somewhat the equivalent, at least the way Michelle explained it. So,
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
I'll ask Westford.
Did you want to do anything with this, or just file it for the moment?
just file for the moment. Maureen? All right. Thanks, folks. Motion?
Motion adjourned?
Second.
Motion made to adjourn and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, folks. There's no nays.
Good meeting.